Ever wondered who and what is shaping Luxembourg? This is your Lux Unplugged podcast with your hosts, Adrien and Thierry.
Hi, I'm Adrien.
And I'm Thierry.
Welcome back to the Lux Unplugged podcast. On this occasion, we welcome Patrick Kersten, CEO and founder at Doctena.
Patrick is a Luxembourg-based entrepreneur veteran, having participated in several waves of innovation since the early 2000s. More recently, the COVID-19 crisis has created further opportunities for his company.
Indeed, Doctena specializes in online bookings with medical practitioners. Patrick has pioneered this concept in Luxembourg and other European countries.
This is correct. In a world with increased use of technology, patients are highly likely to liaise with their doctors on a remote basis with digital means. As you will hear, this also opens the door to artificial intelligence to detect the medical needs of a patient in early fashion.
But now, without further ado, our conversation with Patrick Kersten, founder and CEO at Doctena.
Hello, Patrick. Welcome to the Lux Unplugged podcast. Great to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get into the nitty and gritty of your career and of yourself and the company, for those who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
I would say that I belong to the circle or the group of local internet entrepreneur in a sense that, or from the early stage, in a sense that I've started with some friends doing ventures in the 90s. And that ever since I had the chance to work on new projects, always linked to the digital and different industries, and with different impacts on the Luxembourg society, and lately also in other communities. I think I was just too impatient to be an employee, and I love to get things done. And before the time where there were these mantras of break things, I like to be part of the action, to see things happening, and maybe not be perfect from the first shot you give it, but you can always improve. And that's kind of my approach. And it works from time to time.
How many years did you spend in the private sector, so to speak, before you actually launched your first venture? And what were the kind of takeaways that you have from that, apart from finding out that you were impatient?
Recognizing for myself that I was impatient, and it lasted 1 to 2 years before I really quit. But very quickly came to the facts that there were very exciting times ahead by doing things on the internet. It was just in the middle of the 90s. There was just, you have to imagine there were 30 million people online when we first sat down with some colleagues same age, just having gotten their diploma from university and wondering what the future would be like. So, and things were very exciting back then, and they've always been. And if we look now at the pace which digitalization has been empowering and shaping society since the early days of 2020, with all what we have experienced, we can really get a feeling that there's much more to come.
You launched the at-home group in 2000. Can you tell us about your early .com experience, especially in Luxembourg, and what made you start?
Well, actually, the team I belonged to, we started earlier, and we had a first success with a a job website, and which became Monster in 2000. And at that time, they just split the team in two, and I took over. So my colleague went over to become the manager of Monster, and I took over the remaining projects and launched a new vertical, as this is being referred to these days, because these are very mature industries, just like classifieds. And it was clearly a very strange moment to launch a website, because we just had been paid in shares from an internet company, and then the internet bubble burst. So much of what we had been paid with disappeared. And it was also at the same moment where we decided to do a new project. And well, real estate turned out to be the good choice because lots of money went from the stock markets to more tangible assets, and most notably also real estate. There was we were outliers there at that back then. They were being as pure players. There were not much other pure players around in Luxembourg. Clearly, there was not the same infrastructures to support startups. On the other side, that's what we liked. We liked just trying things, sitting in our basement, and then it started growing very quickly as we went out and showed the users how to use it. And there's always been a very positive, virtuous spiral. The more we added users, the more people started, customers or real estate agents started finding it interesting. And actually, over the last 20 years, I've always worked on platforms. And that's one of the virtuous effects of platforms.
And what obstacles did this business model encounter in its early days, and how did you overcome them during your time at home?
Well, very traditional obstacles. Startups don't run out of cash. They run out of time to prove their concept. So also here, in the early days, we had to scale down back to a team of 3 until we were in a shape where we could prove the market that we could grow profitably. So that's just very common to many young companies these days, and it hasn't changed very much since back then. So it's actually it's just very, very traditional challenges, convincing your first customers, making sure they spread the word, building your brand, just like many companies, digital companies or not digital companies, are doing it today.
Then after you experienced that at home, which we all know, which many people now know in Luxembourg, it's become one of the major real estate portals as it were. Then you founded Doctena in 2013. So what can you tell us a bit more about this experience? Because especially now in these times when a lot of people are concerned about health and booking appointments from a distance. What made you come to that inspiration?
The concept of having a platform where you can see the doctor's availabilities is one which immediately seduced me, and was being worked on the major European capitals by local teams. It struck me then, if you had a list of doctors like in Yellow Pages, if you don't have the availabilities of the doctors next to it, it's pretty much useless. And there already back then there was a strong tendency of doing just any kind of booking online. It had started with the hotels and the travel industry, but very quickly moved to lots of different areas, be it going to the movies or the restaurants, etc. And it made simply sense from a patient perspective. And I always liked to say that we should be patient first, because if it makes sense for the patient, it will be patient driven, because the patients want to have it. And by the way, doctors also are patients, and they also have smartphones, most of them, a very, very large majority of them. And well, what was definitely different is that in the medical sector is known to be a slow-moving sector. Innovation is restricted to some university hospitals. And it's we know now, well, we can see it very clearly now, how healthcare is a very sensitive subject, and that doctors are very prudent, because that's what we expect from them. They don't want to do experiments. And so finding the right way to enter existing processes of existing practices was clearly a totally different challenge than what I have experienced before.
Was that again with a different team when you worked on establishing Doctena, or was it that you decided to do that the moment you exited at home?
As owners of the company, we had sold already a while ago, and I had stayed on just to see what it was like to work for a big company, because it had been acquired by, at the end of the day, the News Corporation and Rupert Murdoch. But I rapidly found out for myself what it was like to be one of the 700 companies that he owned, and that it was just like much less entrepreneurial than what I like to do. And now in that team, I've always been very proud of my teams, and I think the strength of a team is the cohesion and making sure that people know how to work together and to create a dynamic in the team that does not rely on the leader. So I've been very proud to see that the team that I left was going from strength to strength and continues even to thrive today with new leaders and new team members which have joined the company. Some joined Doctena for some new adventures, because they also had some personal interests which were more aligned to that project. It's a totally different type of project and dynamics, and both are very interesting.
So Doctena has become a European leader in its field. Which countries are you currently covering, and what are the expansion plans going forward?
So today we cover the Benelux, which is Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, as well as what the Germans call DACH, which is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. These three or these two areas represent over 500,000 doctors. We've signed up some 10,000 now, so there's a huge potential in all those markets. And we're currently focusing on expanding our market share in the markets where we already operate. Which is quite a challenge in itself, and it's not yet a mature market. And then, of course, with the COVID-19 events, we've had also some major changes in our rollout plans, as this also was something which is totally unforeseen. And so it's a lot of excitement, both to grow vertically and horizontally.
Yes, it was as you just said with the with this COVID-19 crisis. There's a lot of potential now. People are still quite restricted around the world, and even some other countries have already started loosening the conditions. But from your perspective, do you anticipate any sort of high demand for your product instead of using classical ways of communicating with medical professionals or even patients?
In the very early days of the crisis, when the first confinements got announced, it was pretty clear to us that during the lockdown, there would be a need to switch from a physical consultation to a video consultation. And our teams made all efforts needed to be able to release a project which we had on the roadmap, but further down the road, which was the video consultation, video appointment. And we're very proud. We've activated over 1,000 doctors just in a couple of weeks. And that's over 10,000 patients that have seen a doctor without having to leave their apartment or their house, and being safe. This was clearly not a development that we had foreseen. And it is something where we are going, I think, into new territory that we had not expected for 2020. Now, the future will tell us what the deconfinement looks like. on my side, I'm confident that some of the changes that we have been experiencing altogether will stay. And we've just launched a hospital now in Brussels with our technologies, and very clearly it was also something that they had already identified for chronic patients and the follow-up they want to do for those people on a regular basis, because of the comfort that they could offer their patients of not having to come to the hospital, but being able to speak and to see their doctors. So there's always been already some need for these technologies. I think that digital health has really been one of the key industries that came out since the beginning of the year, and that things accelerated here, whereas previously there was lesser priority given to those tools.
Is there any scope for AI or artificial intelligence to be integrated into your product, given that more and more, I suppose, more and more technology will be used going forward to make your service or product more efficient? And again, in the context of COVID-19, I wouldn't be surprised if remote communication would become a bit more of the new normal.
Well, there definitely is. I mean, our focus is on the appointment and arranging the appointment and making sure that you show up to the appointment at the agreed time as a patient, and ideally that you don't have any waiting times. Around the appointment, there's a lot of things that you may want to share with your doctor. I mean, you have chatbots today where you can already fill out some surveys. Fill out your anamnese, which is just the questions that you're being asked when you enter the practice. You could actually fill out those also whilst you're sitting in the bus and do that on your smartphone, answer those questions. You may want to share some medical data or activity data that you've been tracking yourself on your digital phone and with your health tracker. And all these data, once aggregated, there is a whole lot of startups that are creating AI to make sense of all this data. So all this data and all this information, they're all linked to the appointment that you have. And clearly, we want to be the place where we aggregate all those feeds so that this digital information about your health status and how you've been living, all the things which are relevant for you to share with your doctor so that you can do, and so that he can give you the best diagnostic and the best advice on how to treat yourself or to treat the symptoms that you have.
With the growing Luxembourg startup scene, and how do you see the future of the local ecosystem, and especially as a company that was founded in Luxembourg, now operating also in the neighboring countries, like you mentioned? How do you see that this is going to grow, and what is the future looking ahead?
Well, I must say that there's been a hell lot of initiatives, and the good thing is that they are successful. They are attracting a growing number of people to Luxembourg. I mean, Luxembourg is a hugely international place, probably to be compared with the most international places on earth. Luxembourg City has over 70% of not Luxembourgish people living there. There's almost a majority, but if you look at it, there is a majority of people living in Luxembourg that at least have a non-Luxembourgish passport. So this is actually also the reason which is attracting more talent to Luxembourg, and it's this dynamism is actually creating a lot of opportunities also for startups. Certainly, they are different than if you were in Berlin, Paris, or London, and it's up to a point. So it's an environment which helps you get started very quickly, where you can have a nice proof of concept. In later stage or if you're a scale up, well, there's probably an advantage then to be in bigger cities, especially when it comes to funding, because the financing people are more based in those cities where there is a bigger ecosystem. So where for their work they will find more leads or more projects to look at than in Luxembourg.
As this podcast promotes business and its leaders in Luxembourg, our question to you is, what do you like the most about Luxembourg and what are your favorite things to do?
So from a business perspective, I would say that it's a very fertile environment to create new things and to expand to other countries. That's for sure. If you start a new project, you will get these days a lot of support, a hell lot of support compared to what it was some decades ago. And if you have reasonable expectations, you can probably get away with a POC, a proof of concept of your model, which will help you develop it in other markets. From a personal perspective, I must say that the quality of life in Luxembourg is one which I would not trade for many other cities. I mean, there's a lot of offering, a lot of international people you can meet, and if you like to have the right balance between family and work, Luxembourg has definitely a lot to offer. Not speaking about nature, which is everywhere around, just at a very short distance compared to what it would be like if you work in the middle of Berlin, Paris, or London. But that's again, it's personal. It's a personal choice or a personal preference. It is really a good place to work. You are very close to the major decisions centers in Europe. You can do most of them just for a day trip. So you get there in the morning and you go to London in the morning, you're back in the evening with your family. Or you can do the same with any major city in Europe.
Another good point, obviously, what we hear often is, and looking to hear from business leaders, is what would you recommend to individuals starting up a business in Luxembourg? And you covered already a part of the second part of the question is, how has your approach changed in 2020 compared to 2000?
Different approach is that of a 20-year something guy discovering what it is to create a startup, and 20 years later someone who has a bit more experience and had some bruises and paid some learning money, which doesn't mean I'm not paying any learning money anymore. We still continue. The ambitions are not the same, the drive is not the same, and clearly it's interestingly, if you go to this startup in events, there's lots of very interesting young people with lots of ideas and positive energy, and I love to meet them, and if I can give a helping hand to get things started, then I'm always pleased to do so. Also getting access a bit to the initiatives prepared or supported by Lux Innovation. There's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of support being offered by the Luxembourg state to startups and people who want to make things happen.
If we look back at the last 20 years and many, many more to come, what were your seminal moments in your career so far?
Well, actually, there is always seminal moments when you like being in the action. I mean, since the beginning of the year, the launch of the video consultation, the recognition we did get from the governments, the integration to the local payers, the CNS in Luxembourg, those are really strong moments when you win a customer that you've been trying to convince for years, when you sign up a very big hospital those are really seminal moments. And then what's always very important is also being able to step back and to celebrate with the team. And of course, remembering all the moments you've spent then together are also very good memories.
Patrick, we'd like to thank you for this great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the LuxUnplugged podcast. Please share this podcast with friends and family and leave us a review on iTunes. Also, please don't forget to visit our website, LuxUnplugged.com. And see you next time.